Okay, so hopefully you've watched the overview video so you understand kind of some of the basic concepts and what we're going to try to accomplish here. So I have this scene and I've already set up a camera. Oops, there we go. All right, so I have this scene. I don't know what I was thinking. I had it set up so I had the character pointing straight forward, but as I moved my camera around, kind of liked it, didn't want to move anything. There were some other technical reasons, so I just set this up so it's slightly off axis. That's okay, we can deal with it fine, right? So I'm not going to go through setting up the camera other than to say that I did, for the renders here, because this is just the way I roll, I did turn on depth of field, I lowered the f-stop, and I set the focus distance. All just using Maya standard setup. I did do some tweaking in RenderMan settings, just tiny little things for how it's handling the camera, but we won't worry about that. So the first thing is, I think the pose looks pretty good in a lot of places, but it's designed to look through that camera, right? This is the setting that I want. So again, so important to figure out where you want to set your camera, and then do your lighting based on that. Let's look. The other thing here is, if I bring up the hypershade, is the character right now is just set up with a Lambert. So in fact, I think it has a, is that what it is? Maybe it's this one. Let's see. Select object material. Yeah, so everything's assigned to this new body texture, which is a Lambert, right? So let's go ahead and we want to make sure that RenderMan comes with two different renders. The Rays is the old school one. The RAS is the ray tracing path tracer, I guess. That's the one that you want to use, right? I'm not going to change any of the settings other than I did use 800 by 800. I think everything else is just the default. This is not a tutorial on those settings, so I'm going to leave them alone for the most part. All right, so I do have the RenderMan tab, and I'm using Maya 2016 with RenderMan 20, anxiously waiting for 21 to come out in the non-commercial. We have our tab here. We can fire off renders from here or up here, the same Maya. Just so you can see, I'll go ahead and press render. And what you're going to see is the it render is going to fire up over here in the window, right? Let me do a little reorganizing here. Okay, so it's doing a render. So it is rendering with a basic gray on it. So if you wanted to, you could leave it here with that. Of course, it's not really addressing the eyeballs here. And there are no RenderMan lights in here. So just like Maya does, if there's no light in the scene, it will create a default directional light, which we're getting. And then the other thing is that it will use one of these, if it doesn't have a Pixar RenderMan material on it, then it will just assign kind of a basic gray. I want to be able to control the gray shader just a little bit, and of course I do want to put the cornea on there. So I'm just going to select all that geometry and come up here and escape that render and let it sit. But I'm going to keep that window there. It doesn't like to pop up on top when we're using Maya with RenderMan. Okay. So let's go ahead and just close that. So I have all the geometry selected, and what I want to do is add a RenderMan material. Now, there are several different materials. This is not a deep materials tutorial, so I'm just going to keep things simple and use the Create Pixar Disney material. This is kind of their universal material. With all the geometry selected, I'll just go ahead and click on it here. And you can see it adds this default blue. Well, the first thing is I don't want everything to be blue, so we'll just go in here to the color. Maybe we can tone that down a little bit. So just kind of a basic gray. Okay, so and the properties here. So base color, you're seeing it does have a subsurface scatter. Emit color would be like iridescence. Specular is the function of reflectivity, okay, and you can tell that reflectivity model to be just normal like plastic model or a metallic model. We're going to turn that down, or in fact let's just leave it maybe just slightly on 0.1, and let's make the roughness so pretty rough. Okay, so the roughness does affect the shading model, that how things are lit with both the base and the specular, right? Sheen, don't worry about that. Clear coat, there is a place for bumps. That'll be for another tutorial. Main thing is we just want a Pixar material on here, just so we can change it, and because we need to get used to using those anyways. And I'm also going to click on these two little spheres that I added to Ellie's model to give us a cornea. So the Pixar Disney material doesn't have transparency and refraction built into it, but there are other materials. So there's the Pixar LM, or layered materials. So I'm going to right click on that, and there's just a few to pick from. That's just amazing how materials have been streamlined in the 15 years I've been doing this. So we'll just go ahead and choose glass, and I'm going to go ahead and fire off another render, and let's see what we get. Okay, so we're again getting the gray. We don't really have a decent light in the scene, and these are just black. So the issue here is this is glass, so it's treating the object as completely solid, like a chunk of glass. Actually, we just want this to be considered a thin piece of glass. In fact, let me come here and just, instead of just doing a render, I'm going to do this through IPR. Okay. So just like with Maya, this should update along the way when I make some of these changes. Some of them don't work that way. Let's just change the transmission color and refraction color. So I really just want these to be clear. You know, I could tweak it a little bit if I wanted to, but for this purpose, I just want these to be clear, and we're going to get a highlight on top of there once we create some other lights. But we haven't done that yet, right? Okay. So again, this is just IPR. If we went back to the material, there it is. So if we go into the material and change this, you can see we get a different, an update on this. And again, the IPR thing here works on some things. Other times you'll just have to go ahead and click the button to tell Pixar to, or tell RenderMan to get going again on that. Right? So we'll just leave that for now. I think that's a decent gray material, right? And maybe make this specular point too. And give it a little bit of sheen. All right, what are we doing on time? 8 minutes. All right. So I'll click here, escape that. So what we need to do is create some lights in our scene. So let's go ahead and get out this. And here's the icon. There is a full RenderMan menu here. I'm just going to do it through the shelf. So this one here is create a geo area light. So an area light that has geometry. Go ahead and click on this, and well, that may be hard to see here because we're using cylinders and stuff. This is it's down here at the bottom, or sorry, cylinders using centimeters. Let's build this to scale. It's giving me an area light, right? So it has the little RenderMan icon on it. Don't worry about shading rate. Primary visibility is, do we actually want to see that light when the render happens, right? Exposure would be the intensity and the color that we set on there. Shape itself, I'm just going to go through this so you can see I could have a disc, I could do this sphere, I could make a cylinder. This would be a distant area light or a spotlight that we could modify, right? So I'm just going to treat this as a rectangle. And I haven't been using RenderMan that long myself, so this is a little bit of an education as well for me. Let's go to the top view, and I'm going to do this different than what I had the first time. That would just be boring. So with this light selected, if I hit T, and let's go to shade map, you can see that the light is set up, and now I have this little transform, which is like the target for it. And all my lights work this way, right? So I just think this is a better way to position. So obviously the head is going to be kind of the focus for what we want to do. And let's go back to the front, maybe up here. Let's go to the top. Well, let's just try that. And we'll go back to our camera view so we can see what we're looking through. And let's just do this as IPR. Okay. I don't know if you can see this in the with the compression and everything. I can see the character here. It's very faint though, right? So let's go ahead and just turn up the brightness. Right, so that's totally fine. That works for me. And again, you know, as we start doing this, we might want to change lots of things, but this would be a good starting spot, right? So I put this, the light itself, kind of up above the character, off to one side, kind of at a 45. We're getting a decent light in here. So that's our first one. So let's go back to our, so we'll just leave that for now. Let's go back to this perspective camera. And I'm done with kind of tweaking. I'm just going to rotate it just a little bit. All right. So let's go ahead and create a second light. And again, we will go to the top view. I'm thinking about where my camera is related to that. So I'll probably put this in the same side that I had before. So I'm going to hit T again. And I'm going to move the light behind the head, kind of pointing towards it. Let's go back to the right. I'm going to kind of aim for the shoulder here a little bit. And just so I can see it, I'm going to say 15. And you can see it's not updating. I'm making changes, but it hasn't really added the scene, the light to the scene. Could be because of the size, but probably not. There we go. You can see now that I've clicked on it, even though I haven't really changed anything, it has updated it. So let's hit escape to stop the IPR for a second. And I'm just going to change that size a little bit. I can also change the color. And let's go back to our camera one. You can see it's just behind, right? Just off that shoulder. And let's put that down at the shoulder. Maybe I want to make sure I get the top of that head in there. So let's go ahead and fire up IPR. And that was unexpected. All right, stop that for a second. Let me come in here and see what I did. Oh, it's facing the wrong way. Don't know how that happened. The scale. Accidentally went the wrong way. Let's do 3. You see that? So as I was scaling, the redraw was being a little skippy as I was doing that, and it inverted the scale of the light, so it was pointing the wrong direction. It's just like with Maya's light, there's a little indicator with what way that is facing. So let's go back here. Okay. So that's not bad. You can see we're getting some lighting here on the shoulders. That's not bad. A little bit on the head. I still think that could be better. So I'm going to hit T. And figure out exactly where that's pointing. So you can see that it's a big deal. I think the other thing would help that is just making the scale bigger. feeling that didn't update it. Yeah, no, that's not bad. Yeah, it wasn't updating it. So you can see I had that at 15 and it didn't seem to be making a change. Oops. So let's try again. And let's hit escape. I think it's lying to us. So hopefully in version 21 they'll be a little bit better how the IPR updates. Because I'm not really convinced it's updating the way it should be. Okay, we'll call that good for now. We're getting some lighting on there that I think is not bad. Okay, so I think that's a good place to stop on this one. So we've added 2 lights to our scene. We have a key light and we have a little bit of this rim light that's back here. We've changed the color. We've done some positioning. We figured out, be careful with the scale, right? So the size of this should change the intensity, and it also affects like this type of shadow that you're going to get based on the size of this object. We could do primary visibility. Yeah, you can see it's just not updating at times because I turned that to 20, but you can also see the light itself is now showing up as an actual object in the scene, right? So let's go back there. I knew you were lying. Right in between the sweet spot, I guess. So let's go back to 16. There we go. That's pretty good. So the one thing that's nice, and actually it's out of habit, it's difficult to get used to, is the exposure. I'm not even sure this might work exponentially like a camera does, but the in render or in Mental Ray, the exposure numbers can be all over the place, and I think there's a lot more sensitivity in the RenderMan settings here. So you might fine tune much closer than what you would ever do in Mental Ray, right? I'm going to turn primary visibility off. We'll just have that light in there. So let's hit escape, and let's just do one more time. I'll just hit the render button itself. Okay, so a little more dramatic. I might want to dial that back a little bit. You can see we're doing some interesting things as far as the shape of the character. There's a certain mood going on in the scene. And when you're lighting, you sometimes have to kind of find your way, figure out what's going to be the best approach, right? So now that I got this way, such a strong backlight, I want to maybe ramp up my key light. Before that, I'm going to come back to the fill light and see what I get there. So I'm going to go ahead and end this tutorial, and we'll move on to part 3, I guess, of this here in a minute.